A lot of people can buy a property, but do you know what it actually takes to get from 2 properties to 5 in a portfolio? Forget about 20, 30, or even 50 properties. I'm talking real-world strategies that actually create true financial freedom. I'm going to be opening up the investor mindset and what it really means. Detailed financial tips that actually set you up for serious growth, as well as knowing when to actually cut the dead weight in a portfolio, something that no one's really talking about. If you've ever sat there with weight on your shoulders and you just want to get it all off, knowing what it takes to achieve financial freedom is going to help you in doing just that. My name's Arjun Paliwal. I'm the CEO of InvestorKit. Let's get into this episode. It's because people feel like you have to just manifest, think, and they've got this wrong when it comes to mindset. I look at mindset as this way. It's not all the woo-woo and the manifestation and what you're trying to get to. I look at it as if you are given 2 different people with the same household income, the same circumstances of family dynamics, the same monthly savings rates, the same cash in bank. How do these 2 people look at the situation? If they look at it differently, there you go. That's what I mean by mindset. So I'm not talking manifestation. I'm not talking like dreams, desires. That stuff might be important in some phases of your life, but I'm talking about same situation, A to Z, nothing changes except for the decision you make with the information in front of you because of how you look at it. Half glass full, half glass empty. That kind of thinking. And I want to give this to you with just the view of cash flow as one dynamic. Because when it comes to investing, as you're moving from 2 to 3 or 4 or 5 properties, one key thing enters the room: cash flow. Because it's likely that you're removing debt from older properties. It's likely that you're adding further debt into older properties, taking equity out. You're moving money into the 3rd or the 4th property. So it's a bit of this moment where it's like, all right, property 1, I just paid that down. Property 2, oh, it's grown so much, I hardly have any debt on it. And then all of a sudden you're looking at yourself and going, so I'm just going to like reset on all of this, pull all my debt back up and get to 3, 4, or 5 and just have more debt to my eyeballs and everything's here. This is the make or break moment for property investors. And why cash flow plays such an important part. It's unlikely you're in this 0.1% of bracket where you're constantly having the cash to go for property 3, 4, or 5 from your own means of savings. You're using this leapfrog approach of equity to get you there. And so then what happens is on property 3, 4, or 5, you've now using equity means you're 106% leveraged. And for those who are like, well, what do you mean 106%? Think about this for a moment. You might have an 80% loan for your new purchase, but you still have a 20% deposit, stamp duty, buyer's agents, lawyers, pest and building, bit of cosmetic touch-up, and some buffer. You might be at between 106 to 110% financing needed. Now, can you just go and get a 106% loan on a property? No, to take that equity out of to fund that 26%, which is more than the 80% loan you're getting on this next property. So that's the math part. But it usually means no matter how good the rental yield is, that it's not covering itself. And this is where the fear starts coming in for property investors when they move to property 3, 4, and 5. Especially this area. Because in property 1 or 2, you may have had a home that you lived in, maybe moved out of it. Then you bought a new home and you've got 2 properties. Or you have your first investment, you happen to hold it through a cycle, it went really well, rents boomed, and now it basically covers itself. So you're thinking, property, easy game, covers itself. I want more properties that cover themselves. And then this is where the pinch point comes in on mindset when you have to take equity out. This is the way that 2 people look at it. Person 1 and 2 in this scenario, save approximately $2,000 to $3,000 a month. Now, in this scenario, that's great, right? You're saving $2,000 to $3,000 a month. You've got 2 properties. You're looking to get to your 3rd, and this is a great situation to be in. But now comes the reality. Maybe the property is negative cash flow by 1 to 2K a month or 2 to 3K a month. And then that's because of that 106% loan dynamic, a $600,000 to $700,000 or $800,000 purchase price, maybe a lower yield that isn't as high as what you think. There might be some new taxes, some rates, water, insurance, vacancy, maintenance. You've got to be quite holistic. And so when you're looking at this $2,000 or $3,000 a month you're saving, you're looking at it and going, well, this isn't going to work. We're only saving $2,000 and $3,000. I'm going to get back to saving nothing again. And that's already when this mindset difference is hitting. One person goes, I'm saving nothing, too much of my savings. It's going to be too tough. I can't do this. And then the other person goes, wait, so you're telling me if I divert my 2 to 3K a month savings per month into this imaginary bank account, which is a home loan that pulls it from me rather than a savings account that goes up. And then once a year, come into financial year a third to half, depending on my tax rates, are going to come back to me potentially, and it won't be as bad as I thought. And whilst I'm doing that, I get a third property that grows in value by 5, 6, 7, 8, 9% per annum. And so my ins are greater than my outs technically. Just doesn't feel that way because the ins are on paper and a delayed in is coming to you in the tax part, but then the out is in real money. But the difference is they're looking at their savings in two different ways. One person is looking at their savings going, I need that number to go up. Well, no, you don't. You need just enough there for rainy day. You need enough there for holding the properties. A roof issue, a maintenance, a vacancy, a redundancy, a resignation, a switch in job, a job change, something. You just need the buffer there. You don't need constant savings growing by tens of thousands a month or thousands of dollars per month. If it diverts to a property, that's a positive attribution of where that money's going. It's a positive growth rate because the growth of the asset long term, you're trusting and hoping for that to do more than the rate of your savings leaving your account. And the thing is, not all of it leaves and doesn't come back. There might be tax returns. Rents increase over time. This is where two people in the same household, the same money, have a different mindset just because they saw cash flow differently. Now, the next thing is, what decisions do you make on the mindset? And this is one where I want to visualize with you with an actual cash flow sheet scenario here, because this is cash flow and playing the decisions that real Aussies make and they commonly make mistakes on. So what you can see here is a cash flow sheet. Now, by the way, I'm playing around on our tool called Ari, and if you want this, just check out the link in the descriptions. You can grab a free copy now. So when it comes to this particular tool, what you'll notice is a scenario. I've got a $715,000 property. I've selected a less than 4% gross rental yield. So nothing crazy exciting numbers here. And then on top of that, we've got someone on a 150K income as an estimate. And we've also got 106% loan to value ratio, which I told you about before, which is to cover out all the costs and deposits and everything, because you're taking out from equity 1 and 2 to buy property 3 or 4 or 5. And if you scroll all down, we've also got considerations. And by the way, the screen that you see on the left, the reason why the deposit's in the minus is because the deposit's being covered from equity. If I go up top and I bring this back to 80, then all of a sudden the deposit starts showing up to 20%. And that's because that 6% above the 100% is covering the deposit and the stamp duty and other things like that. So that's why that number is that number. Now, if we go back up and we look at this actual tool, the big thing you'll notice here is even after all the rates and water and property management and vacancy and a bit of maintenance, council rates, water, insurances, land tax, which by the way are all fields you can play around with, you'll see this negative cash flow of $596 per week pre-tax, which is around that sort of $2,400 per month, which is taking that person with $3K a month savings down to only $600, or someone at $2,500 a month savings down to just $100 in savings per month. But if they've got the buffer, can you see that post-tax number? This is just an estimate. Have your accountant give you the right numbers, because this isn't financial advice. This is just a generic mapping tool that you can then go to your accountant to speak about the actuals. Now, when it comes to that number, you can see it's a lot lower. It's now up to about $1,500 a month. So that means your money's going to come back at some point, depending on the entity that you buy in. But at the same time, that's forced savings. Now, if you scroll up here, you'll notice this. If the property's growth rate is just 5%, that is already circa $45,000 in the first year. So that's $19,500 post-tax going out, but $45,000 coming back in. And this is how the investor mindset can be different, because if you compound that across 3, 4, or 5 properties and you can hold that third one now, it's going to improve as time goes on, because rents will rise, interest rates may stabilize, your income may change. But what ends up happening now, this is the main point I was referring to, is people typically look at that number and go, ouch, I don't like that number. I want a lower purchase price. Maybe we can get something more affordable. Maybe that'll help. And so let's just say you go to a $600,000 property. And at a $600,000 property, you say to yourself, well, oh, look, that rental yield's much nicer. It's much better. But let's just say the rental yields aren't that much better, but maybe they're a little bit better. And you're still over 4.5% yields here, which is 0.75 more than the previous example I showed you at 715. But check out that after tax. It's $295 a week versus the number we had before, which is actually $375 a week. We're talking around $100 a week. How has your life changed with $100 a week? But guess what? You've moved your wealth generating compounding vehicle from $600,000 in the market compounding, from $715,000 in the market compounding to $600,000. That's $115K less of compounding wealth sitting there long term. But more importantly, the big mistake that people make, they do all these numbers first before they know which markets to select. Now they come in energized going, great, 600 feels a lot more comfortable. Don't do these numbers. That mindset really held them back. And then they look online and they go, oh, you're telling me I got to buy a unit? Or what? I got to buy in this one city that I've never heard of, or maybe max 2 cities across the country. Wait, you're telling me I've got to do a 30K reno job just to get this next place? All these dynamics start coming in. Now, it's not to say there aren't affordable places in the 6s and 5s, but it's to say for $100 a week, you've constricted your choices from 600 and a 600K compounding vehicle across 2 cities to maybe 8 to 10 cities with houses that don't need as much love, or some need strategic renovations, but the choice is yours. Which investor is going to make the better decision? The one with greater choice of greater markets that are all performing quite well, that can diversify their portfolio with the right amount of options to choose from in a faster time to buy? Or the person who goes, oh, let's go 600K because it feels more comfortable, but they didn't realize it's about $100 a week post-tax as an estimate. So this is the power of mindset, and why some people get stuck and they choose not to get the 2nd to the 3rd to the 4th and the 5th because they see these numbers, they trip them out and they go, oh, I can't handle the cash flow. But one person goes, I can, it's 4 savings. The other person goes, let's go to 600K and, oh, maybe let's not buy anything, it's not enough. Or do we really want to buy there? Or maybe let's go in the city versus, 715 sounds good. What options do we have available? That's the part of investor mindset many people miss. Now, investor mindset is a bigger term, and we will in another episode have a whole episode dedicated to investor mindset. Like that I'm looking forward to. But let me give you one more thing on investor mindset. To date, after helping over 1,500 Australians purchase over 2,000 properties with more than $1.4 billion of purchases and generating over $500 million in equity, I'm about to let you in on a secret. I'm yet to meet a successful property investor who isn't a successful person. That is a big thing to say. Meaning, the most successful property investors, and look, we can define success in different ways. I'm talking pure numbers here, like high rates of equity growth, high volume of assets, quick number of assets in a short period of time, diversity, outperformance of national market. These are the things I'm talking about success. I'm not talking about philosophical success in different ways and how it means something different to some different people. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about straight number-based success. And looking at it, you have to be a successful person. And by successful person, let's use numbers to match the numbers of the outcome. I mean, incomes that rise over time, skills that grow over time, demonstrating patience, trust and building a team around you. These are the most common themes. There's this thing I always talk about, which is if you want the results of the wealthy, you must do what the wealthy do. Not want the results of the wealthy, but do the opposite. So does that mean that you can hate your job and build a very successful portfolio? Possible, but unlikely. Does that mean you can never rise up the ranks of a career, never gain skills, never have targets in personal life, never have goals for your health, your energy, your family, your career, your business, and achieve a really great portfolio? Possible, but unlikely. This is huge when it comes to investors. I've seen the numbers. I'm not talking about just me and my family and what we speak from experience. I've seen the numbers. Those that are building or investing to escape. Those that are investing with the victim mindset. Those that are saying that you can't get to 3, 4, and 5. I just don't earn enough. I just will not be able to earn enough. We just can't save enough. We'll never be able to save. They typically don't get the 3rd and 4th and 5th property. But the common thing of the person that does get it is that they work through these goals over time. A gentleman by the name of Angelo is a client of ours, and him and his wife have been investing for over 20 years. Now, the story isn't this huge hype story of how they got to 9 properties, because even if you take some of the smaller assets that they've got, it's probably the equivalent of 5 houses with 5, properties of typical values today. But still an amazing feat. He realized in his particular case, okay, maybe I can't, or I'm not currently getting the income up as I could. I'm trying to grow my business and I'm not getting it to the highest levels of incomes or the biggest businesses that I've seen. But for him, success in those numbers meant that he had to be more patient. He's been investing for 20 years. So he and his wife also realized that they had to hold off all the holidays or some of the holidays. They had to hold off the bigger home, the nicer car, the spending habits. And so the success part can be measured in multiple ways. What's the most you can do with your situation and skill up in those other periods, or sacrificing key periods to build that portfolio to then really look after you in the future? Which, by the way, now in their 50s, they're going to be okay. In about 5 years, they've got a plan now between now and the 5 years ahead to exit a few properties, work with our financial planning relationships alongside our property investments that we bought for them, and be able to actually have the income to retire, which is pretty special. So did it happen earlier than 60 plus? Yes. Did it happen without having all that high income? Yes. But that successful investor mindset that they needed, if not the income and the skills in that area, needed to be the skills and their habits in other areas. That's one example in the non-income growth, the non-career growth related example, but it still needed habits that needed to be successful in other areas. When it comes to the most common though, it's career, business, skills, income, financial habits, long-term thinking, all of these things. So as you think of building a portfolio beyond the 2 properties, just remember there's a reason why 94% of property investors get stuck there. They don't have all of those habits to get them there. And so this is where you look at it as this is what it takes to get to the 3, 4, and 5. And that's tip number 1 when it comes to the investor mindset. It's much bigger than just manifestation and, thinking about wanting to own and believing that you can own it. That's a start, plays a part. The biggest thing here is the way you are in the decision making and how your outlook of decisions are if 2 people or 2 couples or 2 households are presented with the same scenarios and the same situations and the decisions they make off the back of the same set of information. And that's the first layer of mindset. The second layer of mindset is realizing that to build that prolific income, you cannot be average, because average equals average results. And so it will require some shifts, whether it's that Angelo example or whether it's examples like many others of growing their base of skills, time, team around them, income, capabilities, and condensing their buying window. Now let's move over to number 2. This is all about the finance world. Property is a game of finance, but when it comes to finance, we're talking tips in the finance space that enable growth in a portfolio. The first thing of finance I'd like to say is a very simple move. It is simply bank versus broker. The amount of people, even here in 2025, I get surprised by, that constantly go back to their bank to decide they can or whether they should buy the next one is mind-blowing. Really what it comes down to is the broker will have plenty of options for you. And options means different lenders with different policies and different rules to get you different amounts of lending capability. There is a back of the napkin approach that you can take here called debt to income ratio, and we can use this as 6 times multiple. So if you grab your household income plus about 90% of current rental income plus 90% of proposed rental income for a property you're looking at, that will give you a total number, which if you times by 6 will tell you your total borrowing number. Now this is imperfect and why brokers needed to find different things, but it's a start. And if that number leaves some breathing space, then there is possibly some banks out there that'll give you some capability. But if not, and your current bank's saying no, speak to a broker and make sure that they can help you in getting ahead. An investment specialist broker is very different to a regular broker. Now, we work with brokers all the time, and a broker that we've been working really closely with, that we've partnered with, is called 4Acre Financial. 4Acre like acreages, acre, and 4 the number 4. 4acrefinancial.com.au. Check them out if you want to go have a chat to an investment savvy broker. But coming back to finance tips, the first part is brokers versus bankers. Something called broker share has been rising as the years have gone on, which is essentially how much of all loans in Australia are being written by a broker versus written by a bank. That number continues to climb up, and it's more than 3/4. And it's over 70% of home loans in Australia written through a broker, right? So it just shows you how much brokers are being relied upon to get the best result for a customer. And so if you start there, this will really help you in leveling up your portfolio by accessing more banks. The second thing is the type of loan structure and loans you have. Now, this isn't financial advice. It's important to speak to the broker. I mentioned one there, 4acrefinancial.com.au, with your accountant and financial planner where necessary on certain things to get the right advice of what you should do for certain loan structures or what you should do for structures of buying entities. But what can happen is that people can buy in different entities where banks have different rules and policies. So whether it's a trust buying, whether it's personal name buying, whether it's going to interest only or whether it's principal and interest, banks have different policies. There are some banks that look at it and go, well, we will look at your interest only loan as your actual repayment. There are other banks that go, well, we know you're an interest only, but when it ends, it's going to have a much higher principal and interest repayment, and we're going to look at that as your repayment. And that alone could be the difference in some borrowing capacity. How you maintain your credit cards, student loans, personal loans and car loans, all of these things play a factor because some people think they've made it when they got their home. And so then they move on to the ancillaries. Like, do I get my car now? Do we go on that trip? Shall we get that points credit card? Everything becomes a little bit more sophisticated, different lending, different ways because they're like, I got my home. If you had just waited until you got to your properties 3 to 5, this is where the data gets really interesting. In looking at over 1,500 InvestorKit clients' portfolios, we've realized that the most common number that people say that they'd like to hit in terms of a passive income goal is $150,000. And to achieve that $150,000 in projected passive income, not including super, not including shares or other vehicles, the actual average numbers of properties needed by InvestorKit clients was a projected 3.54 properties, which is wild. And it shows you that you could be that 1 or 2 more properties away from getting to your goal, where if you put away these ancillaries, the luxuries and finance from credit cards, overdrafts, personal loans, car loans, just that little bit longer, for that 1 to 2 extra purchases, if you're on 2, takes an average of 3.54 properties. Now, of course, you can't have 3.5 homes, so you might round it up to 4, but just realizing that that extra 1 or 2 properties, if you're on 2, could make such a big difference. So putting aside that car, putting aside that credit card, or putting aside that personal loan could be the game changer. Now, that's $150,000 in inflation-adjusted passive income, and then that 3 properties to 4 properties Now, of course, they're not going to be renting that amount of 150,000 today, but rents rise over time. Or what commonly happens is people actually sell their properties when it gets to the age where they need that, and they get money in their bank account post-tax. And then they use these post-tax money working with financial planners to achieve a higher yield on their money than residential property would, or convert over to commercial. But the key is they only had to go up to 3.5 to 4.5 residentials to get the right amount of properties. So you could be getting quite close to that goal, and all these extra sacrifices on the finance side could be the difference maker. The same thing happens now when it comes to structures, whether you're buying property in trust, personal names, or SMSF, different things, self-managed super fund for those that don't know. These structures have different borrowing rules and laws. Some allow you to look at them from a perspective of, well, if they achieve positive cash flow one day, we can exclude them for liabilities under a corporate entity. Now, it's important to know the two most important things. Some structures, like I've mentioned, might not be right fit for you because you might not be able to handle it the fact that at the start the property's negative cash flow and you can't negatively gear properties. You might not handle the fact that there's many costs to set this up and maintain them. Or you might not need them and you might not have certain beneficiaries or people in your family to distribute things to, and your accountant goes, it's not really needed. Why are we doing this if there are other ways to eventually get to it? Finally, you might look at it and go, the lending rules keep changing. They're a forever changing dynamic, and they have shown some changes recently, so you can't just sit there and expect them not to change. So you have to go get your pros and cons on any structure related decisions with your team of professionals, get the right advice before you make them. But the key here is that it's not always in the property, it's in the finance. Whether it's the wrong debts that you're taking out, whether it's you going direct to a bank, or whether it's the structure that you buy in, all of these things need to be considered. Other more micro tips on the finance thing is that when you now look at your place to live in, this can be a big killer of debts. This can be a big killer of your borrowing capacity. A place to live in has two issues that people don't recognize. Number one is that the mortgage is non-tax deductible. And so as a result, your borrowing capacity is not very strong when it's non-deductible debt. Number two is you're adding on debt as part of your debt to income ratio, but that debt is not adding an income that comes with that debt because it's not earning rent. So it's actually just debt that's being used of your debt to income ratio with no income on that ratio. So you're just working against something and it's holding you back. The third little part I want to give you as a bonus is that the bank also looks at repayments differently to rent. They make repayments have something called a buffer, whether it's a buffer percentage or whether it's something called a loading rate. They look at mortgage repayments on repayments as higher than the rent. And in most cases, the rent is less than the mortgage repayments anyway. So during this portfolio building stage, if you go into buying a home to live in and you do use your finances pretty heavily for something that's not considered as fully good debt. It is good debt to an extent because it's on an asset, but fully good debt, it could hold back the number of properties you purchase. So that's number 2 on finance tips. There's a multiple layering of tips there that you can unpack down to your unique scenario and a lender that we've worked with a lot in helping clients build 3, 4, 5 property portfolios. Now let's move over to the third and final one, getting rid of dead weight on a portfolio. So dead weight to me, the most common scenario I can share with you on how most Aussies get to 2 properties is by becoming the accidental investor. This is essentially someone who buys a home to live in, is upgrading it, can hold on to it. Borrowing capacity says if you make it a rental, you can buy this next one. They go and live in the next one, or they go and rent somewhere, move out of the first one and get a second investment. They now have one investment or a home that was decided on factors that aren't to do with investment related factors, because their first one they moved out of was a home purchase. The second one they moved into is also a home, or they rented out and they purchased one property as an investment, but one isn't. So that means between 50 to 100% of your portfolio has no numbers, no research, no data that actually proves healthy price growth or the right asset decision was made. And it's likely that if you follow this accidental investing approach, you have 2 properties in the same location that lack diversity too. So as cycles move up or down, your whole portfolio moves in the same way. This lack of diversity or this lack of data-backed decision-making for your portfolio leaves you in assets that don't perform as well and therefore dead weight. So that's the most common scenario. Now, how to know to sell this or not? A very simple approach. Firstly, if you moved out of a property and you chat with your accountant about the capital gains tax exemption rules, you've gotten that advice from them and it shows that you're going to be able to get an exemption and it has grown a little bit since you've purchased it. It might be an opportunity to sell it within the 6 years to be able to clear that debt, have no taxes on certain money that's come into your pockets now, and then with that, redeploy the capital onto investment-related decisions that are diverse across the markets with deposits that can now be used on multiple properties. Game changer. Suddenly you go one step back, 2 steps forward. Selling one to buy two. Selling one to buy one in a better location. Or in some cases, you'll be surprised because of the equity being quite well placed since they've called that place home for some time. Selling one to buy three, and suddenly you're there. Combine it with the first 2 tips, game changer. So now you move to another thing to look at when it comes to dead weight, is that if you were to stack that up as an investment today and have a team around you review that property, and they feel that there's a decision that can be made that's better than the first and be made quicker and be made more often. So it's more like a what decision is better than the one I have and the outlook for the one I have. Then all of a sudden, it makes sense to not have opportunity costs hold you back. But the third one is there are moments where you can still make new decisions that are better whilst holding the ones in the past because your capacity allows you to do so. And so in this scenario, I've had this moment where I've had properties that were not performing in my portfolio, bought as that emotional investment, but I still kept them for years because I had the borrowing capacity and continuation to get more. So the key here is that you look at one of these 3 scenarios, the accountant on capital gains tax exemptions and the money that's sitting in there with your team around you. Or the second is the data of your current versus the proposed. And the third is what you'll be able to borrow for the next one if you still kept it. And a combination of these 3 points being reviewed will let you know how to get rid of this dead weight if you should or if you shouldn't. But these 3 key things, from the dead weight analysis to the finance tips to get ahead to the actual investor mindset that you need to have to get ahead, are the 3 most common things to get there. Now, of course, the final bonus to share with you, a 4th thing, is location selection. And if you get the right location with a team around you, coming back to that concept, do what the wealthy do if you want what the wealthy have. What they most commonly do is they build a team around them. In business, in property, and in property, it's a form of the business. And so if, say, we're that team for you, what about the locations we select? In fact, I want to give you an example of a client. Alina and Shane live out in Perth. And they have a home that they'd bought for just over $300,000 some years back. That home's worth over $700,000 as Perth has done really well. So they're in their 40s and they're looking at, well, how do we now build a portfolio? They took equity from there and we purchased them a property in the 300s, $385,000 from memory, in Townsville. We've also purchased them a property in Rockhampton in the low 4s. Both of these properties have risen by over 40% over the last 18 months each. And using that equity, because of the right location selection, we've got the equity to really fast track our deposit. And so now we're already searching for them and working on that next property. So to go from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, sometimes it's not the next strategy, it's not the next mindset tip, it's not the next data on finance, it's not the next finance tip or tactic, it's straight up performance. And if you get the right performance, you can just make the next move. And so from their perspective, they're using a combination of all of these tips I've given today. They've switched their mindset and outlook through the right strategy and the right explanation, giving the cash flow sheet almost in the exact same format as what I shared with you. They're ahead and they know that taking $2,000 or $1,000 away from their cash flow isn't pain, it's growth, but just visualized differently. They know that they want to keep growing their work, their career, their income, and they've been doing that. And it's been amazing to see. Being clients of ours over the last couple of years, we see their income through our annual reviews as we review their portfolio change each year. We then move to the finance tips. They've got our broker on their side. They've got the lending being reviewed. They've got the financial planner and the team around them. They're really savvy with the debts they have and don't have. Then you move over to the third one, which is they know which assets to keep and they've kept that first property that they're living in because there is still growth ahead and they know that even if they move, they're going to keep it, which a move is coming in their plans in the next 5 years. And then they might decide to sell it depending on what the things say, but they have a team around them to make it. And then with the location selection, that 4th bonus tip from Townsville and Rockhampton, their portfolio, and now diversifying to another state, this is allowing them to supercharge a property portfolio and get to their 4th purchase overall, including their home, within the last couple of years. It's a game changer when you put all 3 of these things together, and it's what we specialize in doing at InvestorKit every single day. So when it comes to these 3 tips, I hope that helps you in seeing how you can get from 2 properties to 3, 4, or 5. And when you get to that 3 to 5, this is those final pieces to a portfolio to get most to their passive income goals. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to like and subscribe to get deeper into key strategies and tips like this today on another episode. I'm Arjun Paliwal. See you in the next one.